The writings that we have today are part of what we call wisdom literature. Uh, Depending on the scholar, some would say Ecclesiastes, everybody would say Proverbs, Job, and the Psalms. The Psalms are written to help us with worship. Job is written to help us with suffering. And Proverbs, you would have to say, is there to help us with living. So that's what we're going to look at today. The Proverbs give us a good idea of what the good life looks like and how it should be and the things that we should incorporate into that. So another way of saying it is that Proverbs tells us how to be good at life. And everybody needs an instruction book. If you're going to get a lawnmower, it's going to tell you how to put that together. If you ever got one of these boxes with furniture in it, you got to put 50 million things together. Well, this is the instruction manual on how to be good at life. It talks about the attributes of God, and wisdom is one of the attributes of God. And this wisdom, I'm going to teach you a new Hebrew word, is chokmah. Chokmah is wisdom. It's moral law of the universe, you might say. And one of the nice things that the book points out with is that anybody can interact with wisdom. And wisdom comes from, up there, from God. So in essence, when you are reading the book of Proverbs, you're reading about the mind of God. God's opening up his mind and sharing that with the person who is reading the book. It's interesting what they proclaim. The beginning of wisdom is not sitting down and just thinking about it, but rather it's what we call the fear of God, a good, healthy understanding of who God is and how he responds to us. So chapters 1 through 9 kind of talk about this whole process about what wisdom is and how you get it and what it's for and that type of thing. And then chapters 10 through 31 are going to be sayings in all different kinds of areas of life. And again, the goal is to help us to do better in this gift of life. So in this book, God shows what the character looks like of somebody who is all wise and who is shaped by the wisdom of God. And it's important to note here that all of this is really pointing us towards Jesus because he's the ultimate Mr. Wisdom. He's the ultimate one to learn from. Proverbs, the word in Hebrew, literally means reflect. It's a reflection. How do you reflect on how do you get good at living life? And so we're going to move into this wonderful book. And one of the ways that we do that in the Old Testament particularly, it's so good about telling us what it's about in the introduction. So let's read a little bit of the introduction. It starts by saying the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. And the Bible itself tells us that Solomon wrote probably 3,000 Proverbs and 1,005 songs. So it's another way of saying this guy is prolific. And Solomon is often given the title of the smartest man who ever lived. Well, the reason he was smart is not because he had a great big brain better than anybody else's. He's smart because he listened to God. He tapped into this chokmah. So in essence, what you find when you read Solomon, it's from Solomon finds chokmah, and then he shares it with people. But it goes from God to chokmah to Solomon, and then to people. But what the book is telling you is you can cut Solomon out of the in-between there because you're going to find all of that in Proverbs. So in essence, Proverbs is God's mind opened to you. So it's from God to you to help you live life better. So let's continue. Chapter 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, tells us who the writer is. Solomon's not the one who wrote everything. He's the one that gathers it together in a collection. for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance for understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. Okay, and here's that beginning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, of hokmah, of wisdom. But fools despise wisdom and instruction. And then we have some warnings here against the invitation of sinful men. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teachings. They are a garland to grace your head, and a chain to adorn your neck. My son, if sinful men entice you, don't give in to them. And so the first 9 chapters that we have are some wonderful wisdom and guidance from Solomon. We've looked at the purpose. And so the chapters that we have, particularly in chapters 1 through 22, these are all of the moral benefits of wisdom, the wealth of wisdom. So it's basically saying is if you want to be wealthy, be wealthy in the wisdom that comes from God. It's his operator's book. And so it's important to listen. So I'm going to give you a main lesson from each chapter. And so if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, you might want to write these down because, man, I'm going to go fast. You think this is going to be the Tim choo-choo train. It's going to go through stations, toot, 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 toot. And before you know it, we're going to be at the end of chapter 31. But stop and think. If someone were to tell you they have a young man or a young woman that they would like for you to teach them about life, and you've got 2 or 3 hours to do it, if you taught these 31 lessons and sent someone out to live life, I think they would be in pretty good shape. See what you think when we get to the end of the train station after we make all of our stops. And again, I'm just going to choose one parable, one proverb from each chapter, and you can go through and maybe pick out the ones that you think that you would use. But I just want to show you the pattern of parable after parable, of proverb after proverb. Okay, you ready? We're going fast. Nice thing is you can always rewind this and go back and catch up. Okay, I'm going to give you the proverb and then I'm going to give you the lesson in life. 1:5. Wise men never stop learning. Good way to start. A reminder for us as well that wise people never stop learning, even when you're 70, 80, 90, or older. 2, 4 through 5. If you seek wisdom, you will find it. It's not going to knock you over the head. You have to go looking for it. 3:7. Stay humble. Big teaching of Jesus about humility. 4:7 through 9. Wisdom will eventually reward you. You've got to stick with it. Don't just look at it once, but eventually, if you stick with it, you're going to be rewarded. 5:8. Stay away from temptations. Lead me not into temptation. Stay away from those things. You're going to like this one. 6 through 11. 3 words to you. Work, work, work. 7, 25 through 27. Don't let lust destroy you. 8, 4 through 5. Anybody can learn to be wise. You, me, the guy or the lady that you're talking to and that you have a couple hours. Anybody can learn to be wise if you just go to the right source and get that hokmah. that comes from God himself. 9:8. I don't like this one. You don't like this one, but it's so very, very true. Listen to people when they correct you. Listen to people when they correct you. Oh, here's another really tough one. That's an important lesson to learn. 10:2. Don't hold grudges. 11:1. He sounds like Abraham Lincoln. Be honest. 12:24. The rulers are hard to worship. 13:11. Stay away from rich people. 14:7. Surround yourself with wise people. Anytime you're in a leadership position, this is one of the best things that you can find. And you will see a number of world leaders, a number of people in big organizations. That's always what they do, is they surround themselves with wise people. Oh, this one was put into a movie. 15:1. Speak softly and carry a big stick, a really big stick. 16:8. Wealth is not the end of the game. This is one that we've all learned. 17:3. Use trials to learn and to grow. Use trials to learn and to grow. 18:2. Everybody needs this one. You better learn this one fast as you're growing up, and that is be open-minded. 19:11. Another one that's going to keep you out of trouble. Be slow to anger. 25. Don't just sit there. Be proactive. Take action. 21:7. Don't settle for short-term pleasures, but rather look for long-term pleasures. 22:1. Your reputation is more important than your wealth. Your reputation, more important than your wealth. 23:13-14. Again, another learning lesson that you better learn in life. Be a person of discipline. I know a lot about that from being in the military. Yeah, here's another one that could just eat you up if you don't heed it. That hokmah, so important. 24:29. Do not seek revenge. Because usually it ends up costing you more than if you just leave it alone, let it go, and learn a lesson. 25:21-22. Repay evil with good. Sounds like something Jesus might teach. Oh boy, and here's the really one that you better learn this one or you're going to be sorry. 26:11. Don't repeat your mistakes. Another way of saying learn quickly from your mistakes. I love this one. 27:2. Leave the bragging to your friends. This is an important one for the pandemic that we're going through. 28:1. Don't give in to fear. The antidote for fear is faith. Don't give in to fear. Great proverb for this time in our lives. 29:2. Oh, so very true. People will respect your money? No. Your fame? No. Your integrity? Yes. Great proverb. Oh, yeah. My parents and your parents probably used to throw this one out at us when we were young. 30:17 says, respect your parents. I think I heard that one a couple of times when I was growing up from my mom, from my dad, and sometimes my mom and my dad teaming up. Respect your parents. Another good word of advice. 31:10, use discernment in picking your wife or your husband or your partner of life. So this book is really broken down into 5 different sections. 1 through 9 is kind of the setting up the book and talking about Hokmah and where you get this Hokmah and this wisdom that comes from God. And it's set up kind of like a father giving advice to a son. So that's the first 9 chapters. And then as you get through the next couple of chapters, it's something that makes the reader think. And these are from Solomon. The third section is during the time of Hezekiah, and it makes a proclamation that these are written by Hezekiah's men. Again, there's always a debate whether Solomon wrote all of these or if he's just the editor, which is what most people think. So this is probably the period of time where after Solomon had written his down and after his kingship, he then takes some of these writings that he likes from the time of Hezekiah and puts them into this book of Proverbs. And so the fourth section of this is just one chapter, chapter 30, and this is written by a man by the name of Agar. So it's a very small portion of the book. And one of the things that Agar likes to do, he loves to look at contrasts between the rich and the poor, between generous and stingy. So if you like contrasts, you're going to like chapter 30. And 31 talks about the attributes of a capable wife. And obviously the scope here is to turn those around and also look at the attributes of a wonderful husband. So that's chapter 31, which is the end of this particular book. So let's go back even to the New Testament, which reminds us of a fact that we often bring up, is that all Scripture is breathed by God. It's useful for correction and instruction, and it goes on and on from there. And that's what we're talking about here. This is God-breathed. This is Hokmah. This is wisdom from the mind of God to the mind of people like you and me. And so all Scripture is breathed by God. It's good for instruction and correction. And so that's what we get in these books. This is wisdom. Wisdom for living life the best that we can. Living life the way that God wants us to live that life. As you look into the New Testament, you might say these are things that are preparing us to live in the kingdom. These are kingdom instructions as well, what it's going to look like to be a part of that kingdom. So here we find wisdom, and here we find it's showing us God's character. And the character of God that's being portrayed in this book is what? That God is all wise. Yep, he's all wise. And then there's probably a little PS on there, so you better listen to what he says. The second thing that's important here is to understand not only is he all wise, but he likes to share his wisdom. And that's what you have in these wisdom books. God is sharing his wisdom of when you get into Psalms of how you worship. With Job, how do you respond when you're suffering? And in Proverbs, how do you live life to its best, to its fullest? How do you have a really good life so when you look back, you have your own legacy in your mind and you say, yeah, This was a really good life. And the reason that it was because I learned about Hokmah. I learned to trust God and to listen to the advice that He's giving me so I can live this life. And again, as we conclude, we would say that all of life is given to us by God, and it points to Jesus, that Jesus is going to be Mr. Hokmah, Mr. Wisdom. Do you remember some of the words of God? He says, "This is my son. Listen to him. Listen to him." Well, in this case, he's saying, "Listen to me." And then when my son comes, listen to him, because he has that hokmah that I want to pass on to you. As Jesus might say, that you might have life and you would have it, abundantly. And my friends, that would be my prayer for you today. So let's see if I can find our homework assignment for today. We're going to take a look at the Bible Project. So take a look at Proverbs, the Bible Project. It's only about 7 to 8 minutes long. It'll give you a nice, a different set of kind of way of looking at the book, which is what I try to do every time I teach, to give you 3 looks, mine, and then 2 others that are a little bit different from each other. So you're very used to this book or this way of doing study. So let's go one more time to the Bible Project. And then I'd also like you to take a look at it. It's another one that's really short. It's only about 5 minutes long. And it's called "What's the Book of Proverbs All About?" And it's an introduction. So I hope that you have enjoyed this, that you have a little better understanding of what you've already read. You've read one here, one here, one here, one here, and one here. And today, hopefully, what we did is we took them all back, put it into a basket, and showed you a little bit about what this wonderful book of Proverbs is all about. It's about living life to its fullest. It's about listening to the manual, the owner's manual that comes with your life. It's called Proverbs. It's called Hokmah.